All right, here we are talking about Chapter 3 of Make by Pieter Levels. And this was a bit of a longer chapter, but I think there are just a few useful points for people to get. The first key takeaway is to build fast and minimal. You don't need to necessarily have a bunch of features before you launch your app. The key is to get it out there. It's okay if it has bugs, but as long as you fix those bugs quickly and users like it and they're able to report existing bugs, a minimal app is a totally viable option if you're looking to start something that way. Second key takeaway is to build yourself. I think this was probably the most interesting part of this chapter for me. He talks about how a single developer can iterate much faster if the person is coding their app themselves. That person doesn't have to wait for someone they hired to come back from vacation. They can fix bugs themselves quickly, and the level of care they can provide to their users is much higher. He also talked about this with relation to VC funding, and I thought this was super interesting. He says the biggest downside to VC funding is that it actually lets companies get away with skipping the validation phase, which is not something I had thought of. In Chapter 2, Pieter makes this comment multiple times that you need to validate your idea, and focusing on speed and getting your MVP out there as quick as possible is what lets you do that validation. But if you get that VC funding too early and you hire a bunch of developers, you could actually be wasting a lot of time and money if the idea hasn't been properly vetted and you haven't figured out your business model. So I think this idea of like a DIY developer outperforming a VC-funded team is pretty incredible. I'm someone who comes from a coding background, so of course I believe everyone should learn how to code. He does talk about how he believes everyone should learn to build it themselves rather than trying to hire it out. And he talks about how a lot of software development is Googling, which is totally true. And nowadays with AI development, coding has gotten so much easier. If you want to learn how to build a website, you can absolutely punch that into ChatGPT and it'll give you like a really basic starting point that's more than enough for starting a simple online business. The third big point that Pieter mentions is that you should use the tools you already have. This is something that I am very guilty of. I have often chased new frameworks. So the coding language that I'm most familiar with is Python, but I've looked at Rust, I've looked at Go, I've obviously looked at JavaScript, and it's so easy to want to chase those tools and to believe that if you just learn this one new thing, you'll be able to build much better apps or whatever. But in reality, most languages can do most things. And so use the tools you already have. There's no sense in chasing new ones because, yes, you could probably build something that's way faster, way better in like C++, but when you're early on, you're just trying to validate your idea. You're trying to make sure it works. And if you need to scale up later by getting a team of developers to help you build out a more advanced engine for whatever your website or app does, then you can do it then, but it's not something you need to do from the get-go. And then finally, the thing he points out is you can get really far without knowing how to code, and maybe that's better for validating your idea. He mentioned Zapier, which is it's something I'd heard of, but I hadn't really explored. For this video, I took a look, and it's really incredible what you can do with some of these tools. So just to kind of learn how Zapier works, I set up a form on Google, and basically I set it up so that every time someone submits an answer to the form, it gets added to a Google Sheet. And then on Zapier, I was able to set up an automation that watches that Google Sheet. And whenever someone fills out the form, if they enter their email, it sends them an email that just lets them know that I got their response. I mean, you could absolutely build that yourself probably in a day, but it would probably take you like an hour, probably a few hours if you hadn't done it before. It took me probably about 10 minutes to set up in Zapier, so it's pretty incredible. And no-code, low-code tools have been on the rise lately, and I think it's something we're going to see more and more of. And with Zapier, you can even plug in AI into your automations. So Zapier looks like something that's really powerful And I think I would even use it if I was going to start something from scratch. I think the downside to tools like Zapier is if you want to do something super niche, like if you want to do some kind of really custom automation that is not pre-programmed in their thing, that might be a bit of a struggle for you. But the plugins they have are pretty incredible. You can connect to MailChimp, Airtable, Google Sheets, Google Forms, Twilio if you want to send text messages. You can even connect to Slack. It's just an endless list of things you can do on Zapier, and there's like a million tutorials on YouTube for how to do it. That's actually how I set up the one I did. This chapter was all about building your idea, use the tools you have, build it yourself, and you can move very quickly with just those few things. All right, that's chapter 3 of Make. I will see you tomorrow for chapter 4.